She walked in holding a $140 shoe that changed women's basketball forever, and walked out holding nothing but a loss that exposed every dirty secret inside the Indiana Fever. Here's what nobody is telling you. The box score says Indiana lost 108-101. That's the surface. But buried inside those 40 minutes of basketball is something far more disturbing. A pattern, a series of decisions, a chain of events that suggests the people responsible for protecting Caitlin Clark might actually be the ones hurting her the most. By the time this video is over, you're going to look at this franchise completely differently. And trust me, the worst part isn't what happened on the court. The worst part is what happened on the sideline, and nobody is talking about it the way it deserves to be talked about. Before we go any further, if you're the kind of person who wants the real story, not the highlights package, not the PR spin, the actual breakdown of what went wrong and who's responsible, hit subscribe right now. We do this every single game, every decision, every mistake, every pattern. Nobody misses a detail. Hit that button and let's get into it. She didn't just walk into Gainbridge Fieldhouse. She walked in like a statement. All-white outfit, brand new shoes in her hands, held like something precious. Racer blue Nikes with her initials stitched into the tongue. The Caitlin one. Her first ever signature shoe from one of the most powerful brands on the planet. Nike had spent the entire week constructing this moment. Clark changed her Instagram handle. She posted cryptic photos. Travis Scott was photographed wearing a black and chrome pair. The internet was fully ignited. This was supposed to be a coronation. And then the game started. What happened over the next 2.5 hours didn't just ruin one night. It pulled back the curtain on an organization that has no idea how to protect, deploy, or build around the most important player in women's basketball today. Let's break down exactly what happened, and more importantly, exactly who is responsible. Going into the fourth quarter, Caitlin Clark had 26 points and 7 assists. Read that slowly. 26 points, 7 assists. That is an elite performance by any standard, in any league, in any era. She was not struggling. She was not cold. She was not off. She was doing everything a franchise player is supposed to do on a marquee night. And then the fourth quarter happened. Clark finished the game with 26 points and 7 assists. The exact same numbers. Not one additional point, not one additional assist. She went the entire final period completely frozen out of the box score while her team lost a game they had already tied. That doesn't happen by accident. That is the result of specific decisions made by specific people. And we're going to walk through every single one of them. Here's where it starts getting uncomfortable. Clark had been aggressive all night, attacking the rim, drawing contact, playing the way she needs to play for Indiana to win. The refs were calling it tight. Fouls were piling up. She picked up her fourth, then her fifth. With 8 minutes and 41 seconds left in the fourth quarter, Clark was whistled for her 5th personal foul. The reaction in the building was immediate. People on the broadcast flagged it. Social media exploded. The clip circulated with one word being repeated over and over. Phantom. Standing on the sideline with a challenge available was head coach Stephanie White. She did not challenge. She let the call stand. Clark went to the bench with 5 fouls, trailing by 9, with the most important stretch of the game still ahead. Now keep this in mind as we go forward, because what comes next is going to tell you everything you need to know about the priorities inside this organization. This was not a one-time mistake. This is not a coach making a tough call in a chaotic moment. Clark has finished games with 5 fouls in 3 of the last 5 games. She had 4 fouls in the other 2. This is a documented, repeated, season-long pattern. Media has criticized it. Analysts have called it out. Fans who watch this team every single night have been raising the alarm for weeks. After this game, reporter Robin Lundberg went directly at Stephanie White publicly, stating that White needs to start using her challenges on the obvious calls against Clark. And here is the detail that makes this go from questionable to genuinely indefensible. White did use her challenge during this game. She used it on a different play, involving a different player. On a call that observers noted was far less controversial than the ones against Clark that went completely unchallenged. The challenge was available. It was a tool sitting right there on the sideline. And the coaching staff made a conscious, deliberate decision to spend it somewhere else while their franchise player got called off the floor with 5 fouls in the final 8 minutes. That is not bad luck. That is a choice. And every consequence that followed is the direct result of that choice. Now, here is the part that complicates everything. With Clark sitting on the bench in foul trouble, Indiana started playing better. Significantly better. The Fever went on a 13-3 run. Kelsey Mitchell caught fire. Aaliyah Boston started taking over inside. The 9-point deficit disappeared. Indiana clawed all the way back and tied the game at 93 with just over 5 minutes remaining. Mitchell was the engine of everything. She hit a deep three that gave her 700 career three-pointers, making her only the 8th player in WNBA history to reach that milestone. The arena was alive. The momentum had completely flipped, and Stephanie White was standing on the sideline watching her team mount a historic comeback without Caitlin Clark on the floor. After the game, White was asked about that run. Her answer raised more questions than it answered. She praised the group that was out there without Clark, said they dug in defensively, said they moved the ball and got higher quality looks. Every word of that might be true. But think about what it looks like. A head coach publicly celebrating lineups that don't include her franchise player after a loss, while that franchise player is sitting on the bench. There have been reports all season about a philosophical tension inside this organization. A disconnect between the structured team offense that White prefers to run and the kind of player-led, creation-heavy system that a player like Clark naturally generates and demands. Whether that tension is real or it is perception, the optics of moments like this pour gasoline on a fire that this franchise cannot afford to let burn. Clark came back with 3 minutes and 16 seconds remaining. 3 minutes. Indiana had just completed one of the best runs of their season. They had clawed back from 9 down. They had tied the game. Their best player was back on the floor for the finish. This is the moment. This is when the coaching staff looks at the woman who had 26 points and 7 assists and says, "The ball is yours. Go win this for us." That did not happen. Clark re-entered the game and the offense did not go through her. She took 1 shot the entire 4th quarter. 1. The same player who had been the engine of everything good Indiana did for 3 quarters was standing inside the rotation, watching the game slip away without the basketball finding her hands. The results were catastrophic. Atlanta seized control immediately. The Dream went on a 13-6 run. Indiana's 17th turnover of the night led to a fast break layup that pushed Atlanta ahead 99-95 with just over 2 minutes left. Indiana never came back. Final score, Atlanta 108, Indiana 101. Think about what just happened. Clark was brought back into the game in the final 3 minutes. She had 5 fouls, so she couldn't play aggressive defense. She wasn't getting the ball in positions to create. She was essentially standing on the floor as a decoy with no function. If the coaching staff had already decided not to run the offense through her, what was the point of putting her back in? The analytically honest decision, if you're not going to involve her, is to keep her on the bench. At minimum, her foul situation stays protected. You avoid the risk of a 6th foul. She doesn't pick up a meaningless disqualification in the final 2 minutes. Bringing her back and not involving her accomplished absolutely nothing. It did not help Indiana score. It did not improve the defense. It placed the franchise's most important player in a position where she could do nothing but watch the loss happen from 5 feet closer. Mitchell was hot. She was the hot hand. The coaching philosophy was to ride what was working and not disrupt the rhythm. That sounds reasonable on the surface, but this is not pickup basketball. This is professional coaching at the highest level of the sport. Elite coaching staffs do not treat offense as a single lane that can only flow through one player at a time. You can run Mitchell off screens and simultaneously create actions that put the ball in Clark's hands. You can use Clark as the initiator and let Mitchell operate as the release valve. The idea that the offense can only go through one person is not a basketball limitation. It is a scheme limitation. It is a creativity limitation. It is a coaching failure dressed up in the language of strategy. When you have a player sitting on your bench with 26 points and 7 assists, and you bring her back on the floor for the final 3 minutes of a tied game and still cannot find a way to get her a shot, that is not a decision. That is a failure of professional design. Cunningham came out of the first quarter on fire. 10 points. She was hot. She was converting. She was clicking perfectly inside the Clark-centered system that had been driving Indiana's winning streak. And then the first quarter ended, and Cunningham essentially vanished. She did not get another shot opportunity until the fourth quarter. She finished with 12 points for the full game. A player who was rolling, who was connecting, who was feeding directly off the system, got completely frozen out for the entire middle stretch of the game. If that sounds familiar, it should, because the exact same thing happened with Clark. When someone is working within the system is supposed to feed them more, not less. The fact that productive contributors keep getting removed from shot opportunity rotations for long stretches suggests something is fundamentally broken in how this offense is being managed at a decision-making level. Stay with me, because what I'm about to show you about the defensive side of this game is somehow even worse than everything we just covered. And it connects to something much bigger about what this franchise is actually building, or failing to build, around their generational player. All 5 Atlanta starters scored in double figures. All 5. Ryan Howard had 16. Jordan Canada poured in 18. Alicia Clark contributed 17. Naz Hillman added 17. Angel Reese led everything with 21. When your defense allows 5 opposing players to score in double figures, with 4 of them reaching 16 or more, you cannot point to a single matchup failure. There is no individual culprit to blame. The defensive scheme itself is the problem. The adjustments that professional coaching staffs make to prevent distributed offensive production simply were not executed. Atlanta got whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted it. They attacked the paint. They generated turnovers. They converted. Indiana committed 17 turnovers in a game they needed to win. Indiana currently allows the second most points per game in the entire league. That is not a one-game number. That is 14 games of evidence pointing at a systemic defensive problem that has not been solved and shows no sign of being solved. The 4-game winning streak that preceded this loss was built entirely against teams at the bottom of the standings. Teams playing for lottery position. Teams that make your defensive numbers look better than they actually are. This game against Atlanta, a team sitting at 10-4 and competing for real positioning, exposed exactly what that winning streak was hiding. Michaela Timpson was on the floor in late-game critical minutes. She is a second-year player. That is not a criticism of her effort or her talent. That is a reflection of the fact that the roster around Clark does not have enough proven depth to keep developmental players out of high-leverage crunch-time situations. Monique Billings was the marquee free agency addition of the offseason. She was signed to address specific competitive needs at specific moments. By all accounts, she has been unable to deliver consistent fourth-quarter contributions in competitive games throughout this season. The investment implied a certain level of production that has not materialized. When your biggest off-season signing cannot be deployed in the final minutes, and a second-year player is filling those minutes by default, the accountability for that gap belongs in the front office. Raven Johnson, the 9th overall pick, played 3 minutes in this game. 3 minutes. Whether that reflects her development, the coaching staff's philosophy, or some other dynamic inside the organization, the result is a high draft investment generating almost no competitive value in a meaningful home loss. And Ty Harris played 15 minutes despite criticism throughout the season that her contributions do not justify that usage on a roster that is supposed to be pushing toward the postseason. Every single one of these deployment decisions reflects either a coaching failure or a roster construction failure, usually both. And the collective result of all of them falls on the people who made those decisions. Here is the detail that makes Indiana's foul management look even worse. Reese had 4 fouls herself. She picked them up in the first half and had to sit with nearly 6 minutes remaining in the second quarter. Her foul trouble was worse than Clark's earlier in the game. But when Reese came back, she played the entire second half without adding another foul. She adjusted. She figured out how to be aggressive within the rules without crossing the line. She finished with 21 points and 11 rebounds for her 10th double-double of the season. Clark had 5 fouls and ended up in a bench stint, a limited return, and a stat line that did not move for the entire final 12 minutes. Reese had more fouls in the first half and still dominated the second half. The contrast is not subtle, and the question it raises about the management of Clark's foul trouble is one this coaching staff needs to answer honestly. She called the Caitlin one her debut album. She said she wanted it to be killer. She is only the 5th active WNBA player with a signature shoe from a major brand. She joins Angel Reese with Reebok, Breanna Stewart with Puma, Sabrina Ionescu and Aja Wilson with Nike. The shoe features new optic air technology, Zoom Air cushioning, a design inspired by the shoes Clark wore throughout her entire playing career. It launches in October at $140. That is a genuine milestone, not just for Clark, for the entire sport. She walked into Gainbridge Fieldhouse holding those shoes like something rare. Because they are. And the game that accompanied that moment turned what should have been a pure celebration into a case study of everything simultaneously working against her. The refs, the coaching decisions, the foul trouble, the frozen fourth quarter, the loss. If you were writing a script for the worst possible night to debut a signature shoe, you could not construct something more precisely designed to undercut the moment. Here's what you need to think about before Saturday's rematch in Atlanta. The structural problems that produced Thursday's loss do not disappear with a bus ride. Clark's foul trouble pattern does not reset. The challenge philosophy does not change overnight. The defensive scheme that gave up 108 points does not get fixed before tip-off. The roster limitations are locked in for this season. But one thing can change: the offensive design. The willingness to put the basketball in the hands of the player who produces 26 points and 7 assists by the fourth quarter. The recognition that when your best player comes back from the bench in a tied game with 3 minutes left, she deserves to touch the ball. Indiana is 9-6. Atlanta is 10-4. The Fever are 3rd in the East. The talent is undeniably real. But talent without structure is just potential. And potential does not win championships. It does not win close games in the fourth quarter. It does not protect franchise players from phantom fouls. It does not design offenses that use multiple weapons simultaneously. It does not build rosters deep enough to keep developmental players out of crunch time. The Indiana Fever have Caitlin Clark. They have Aaliyah Boston. They have Kelsey Mitchell and Sophie Cunningham. That core is legitimate. That core can compete at the highest level on any given night. But every level of this organization contributed to Thursday's loss. The coaching staff's challenge decisions, the offensive design in the final minutes, the defensive scheme that let 5 players feast, the front office moves that created depth problems at the worst possible moments. And the pattern of second and third quarter collapses that has followed this team all season showed up again Thursday night. with Atlanta steadily building advantages through the middle quarters in ways that no fourth-quarter urgency could fully reverse. The Caitlin 1 drops in October. The question is whether the team wearing them will be ready to match what they represent. And right now, based on everything we just watched, that answer is not guaranteed.